authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
Started. I calling Diddy's assistant to the stand and by asking him questions about what he did, what his role was. I think that's clear that they're beginning to lay the foundation. And Cassie's testimony itself also had to deal with the racketeering. So to directly answer the question, I think we're already there. Racketeering is a challenging charge. I think that it's a tough charge in this particular case. But by setting forth who was in the room, how did people get from places from point A to point B? James testified as to how he would set up the rooms and the hotel rooms. And then obviously now we're getting into the Punisher's testimony and the like. I think we're there.
By the way, we have polls up on Law and Crime's YouTube as well. We have a poll up right now. Do you believe David James' testimony helps or hurts Diddy's defense? Really, that's an interesting question here. Because there were elements to it, Serena, right? Where he said he didn't observe the violence, right? He didn't observe Cassandra Ventura being violent, but he talked about, some guns. He talked about the Suge Knight incident. He talked about how it was Combs' kingdom and it was to do what he wanted. But you also have to wonder, how much did his testimony support criminal activity? And that's the interesting part. I'm getting word right now. I think we have to hit a quick break. So, Serena, let's hold off. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Family presence that we were used to seeing, especially in those first couple of days.
Yeah, it's interesting to always hear who appears there. Okay, so I have to talk about the testimony right now. We can get into David James in a little bit, but we talked about him a little bit yesterday. Talk to me about Cassandra Ventura's mother. So we knew that she was going to testify today. What was her value to the prosecution's case? Let's start there, and then we'll move into the cross-examination.
Yeah, well, initially we had thought, and by we mean me, Elizabeth, thought that Cassie's mother was inside that courtroom. I spoke with Cassie's attorney, Doug Wigder, who informed me that the person that we had initially thought was Cassie's mom was actually a victim's right advocate. So when Cassie's mom came into that courtroom, I was like, yes, this is definitely Cassie's mother, because they look so much alike. You would think that they were just looking kind of at an older version, a little bit of Cassie. But when she came inside that courtroom today to give her testimony, she just kind of walked up to the witness stand, kind of similar to how other witnesses have been doing it. But I think most notably, Diddy didn't really look in her way or look in her direction, at least when she had first entered the courtroom. At least when Cassie came inside the courtroom to do her testimony, even if it was on a day of cross, if it was on a day of direct, Diddy would kind of turn around and look whenever she had entered that courtroom, if he wasn't kind of chatting with his lawyers or anything like that. But as far as Regina Ventura coming into the courtroom today, it wasn't the same case. Diddy kind of sat while he was at his defense table chatting with his lawyers, but a lot of the testimony as far as Regina Ventura being on the stand today was kind of in relation to just everything she had witnessed from her daughter during her relationship with Diddy years before. So she had essentially said that she had met Diddy for the first time in 2006, actually when Diddy wasn't Cassie's boyfriend. This is when Cassie was actually signing to Bad Boy. Regina just knew of Diddy as Cassie's boss at the time before.
Do you ever look at someone and think, how do they handle everything so well? Why don't things seem to affect them in the same way?
Before the two being Cassie and Diddy began dating, they dated here in New York City, and then they had moved to Los Angeles together. And once they made that move to LA, because Regina Ventura, according to her, she had been living in New London, Connecticut for about 57 years. So she has roots here on the East Coast. So when Cassie had moved over to the West Coast, it wasn't the same situation because she's all the way on the other side of the country, essentially. And so the contact and the visits weren't as frequent as when she was here in New York. But even when she was here in New York, it wasn't that often, too. But what the prosecution really wanted to know from Regina was everything that had happened specifically in December of 2011. If you guys remember that time period, that's around the time that Diddy had accused Cassie of cheating on him with Kid Cudi and the whole Kid Cudi relationship. So around this time period, Cassie came home from the holidays. We saw an exhibit photo from an email from December 23rd of 2011 where Cassie emailed her mom on this email under the email address of Veronica, of the aliases that she had used. And she also attached Capricorn Clark, who had worked for Diddy, into this email. So I was able to scribble down just as much as I could as far as what all the contents were in this email, because this is an email that we had previously seen before. And so what Cassie relayed to her mother as well as Capricorn Clark was the threats that have been made toward me the threats that have been made toward me by Sean Combs are that he's going to release 2 explicit sex tapes of me, one on Christmas Day, maybe before or right after, and another one sometime soon after. He also said that he will be having someone hurt me and Scott being Kid Cudi, physically. And it wouldn't be at the hands of Diddy himself. It would be essentially kind of saying that it would be up to somebody else's hands. But when Cassie's mom was on the stand and just kind of responding to everything like that, she had said things such as, the sex tapes threw me. I thought he was trying to hurt my daughter. And then they brought in that Diddy essentially demanded $20,000 from Cassie, pretty much to the point that Regina and her husband, Cassie's father, took out a home equity loan for $20,000 just to meet Diddy's demand after he had requested money. And so Regina said that Diddy was essentially angry because he had spent money on Cassie and Cassie was with somebody else, that other person being Kid Cudi, and that Regina had sent this $20,000 check after getting this loan from the bank to the Bad Boy account. But here's the thing, Jesse, is just 4 to 5 days later, this check was actually returned to Regina and her family, so the money was given back to them. And this was something before the jury had even come in today that they were talking about in court outside of the jury, because the defense didn't want this testimony in. They wanted nobody to hear this testimony. But this testimony, so we did kind of know what a preview of, and so she had testified to that fact today while on the stand. But we had seen some more exhibits, those taken of Regina, again in that 2011 time period, of Cassie being bruised. They had mentioned that Cassie, her particular hairstyle around this time was that of a shaved head. Regina confirmed that between 2009 to 2011, Cassie's hair was shaved, and that's what the hairstyle that we had seen of Cassie kind of posing with some of the bruises inflicted by her then boyfriend, that being of Diddy. And so a lot of the big testimony, especially when it came to Regina Ventura being under direct examination, was about this $20,000 loan. Then there was another incident they had talked about. This one from this is from 2016. So this was around, this was actually that same year the Intercontinental Hotel incident had happened. that essentially Regina traveled to LA for Cassie's birthday. Diddy took Cassie's phone after being mad at her. And then there was this whole incident where Regina called the police, and that Diddy gave the phone back eventually. Regina was screaming at Diddy to give her daughter her phone back. And that Regina even owned up to the fact that she tried to hit Diddy, while the person in the middle of this was D-Rock, one of the security guards, was in this kind of trying to de-escalate the entire situation. But when it came to the cross-examination, I didn't even know what to expect for the cross-examination, but spoiler alert, there actually was no cross-examination. Mark Agnifilo got up on the stand and he essentially said, "I have no questions for you, Miss Ventura." Yeah. And then Regina Ventura was off the witness stand and done for the day.
Yeah, I think that's very strategic when defense chooses not to cross-examine a witness. There might be no benefit to them. There might be nothing they need to gain. They might be accepting what she says and just recharacterizing it. Remember, a big theme in this case is it might be domestic violence, a turbulent relationship, but it's not sex trafficking or racketeering. Okay, so Elizabeth, I know I only have a few more minutes with you, so I want to move on to the additional testimony of a man we heard about last week, the Punisher. That's his nickname. Who is the Punisher? What did he testify to so far?
Yep. Well, the Punisher, when he had come in, didn't even realize he was the Punisher. Because let me tell you something, Jesse, when we're seeing these exhibit photos of all the different men and the different escorts that were used during these freak-offs, or were kind of playing this type of role in these fantasies that were talked about during testimony, sometimes it's hard to be like, oh wow, that's actually this person. So when Sheree Hayes walked inside the courtroom today, I was like, oh, they're going to have another testimony from another person who worked with Diddy, but that wasn't the case. Immediately, just right off the bat, he had said that his nickname was the Punisher and that he was a male exotic dancer, and I was like, oh, that kind of clicked. So he had walked in. He's a very tall man. He's well put together. He had an entire suit on with a tie. He's very built, and the first thing that the prosecution asked was just about the exhibit photos. Those exhibit photos being just kind of a standard press photo, essentially, of Diddy and Cassie, and he confirmed that that's Cassie Ventura and that's Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And so he said in the fall of 2012, he was paid to create a sexy, erotic scene for a woman who had called him. He said that he met the two while he was working at a club event, but it was a woman who had called him saying that she wanted kind of a present by her husband around her birthday time, and that her husband said it was okay if she were to hire a dancer. So the Punisher initially thought that he was going to be doing kind of a dance for women at a bachelorette party, but when somebody opened the door, it was, lo and behold, Cassie Ventura. He had said that she was wearing a bathrobe and she was a wig, and initially didn't even recognize her at first. But this was this first meetup that they had, again, expecting a crowd during this, but really it was just Cassie in the room, again, not knowing it was Cassie at the time. And then he was told that her husband wanted her to put baby oil on each other and create this kind of fantasy, this erotic scene, essentially, and that Cassie handed him $800. But he had one kind of stipulation. He was told specifically not to acknowledge the husband or say anything to him. He said all the furniture was covered with sheets. There was baby oil and water off to this side, and that the Punisher and Cassie just rubbed baby oil on one another. He said after, while this was kind of going on, a man came out. He was nude. He had Astroglide in his hand, and however, his face was covered. And he says that during this, the husband, per se, was pleasuring himself and that type of thing. And the prosecution asked, was this man giving any type of direction or anything like that? The Punisher responded that that the direction was move to the side or position your body a certain way, and that this entire encounter lasted about 25 minutes to about half an hour, and that he actually didn't know it was Diddy or Sean Combs himself until later on. But he said after this whole entire encounter, he got more money, an additional $1,200, and then he was contacted again a few times, and he said he did this about 8 to 12 times even after the fact. And so that's where we would wrapped up when we were getting out of court for the lunch break. And so I expect testimony to pick up and go more into just everything the Punisher had kind of did during this entire time frame. Again, the husband that he now knows to be Sean Combs, and again, the woman kind of pretending to be the wife, and this fantasy play, that being Cassie Ventura. So I expect more testimony to come from the Punisher, but don't know kind of what direction that'll go into. Sometimes you just never know in this case.
Listen, that's what we're trying to figure out. So, you know, you are our eyes and our ears in that courtroom, always giving us up-to-date, detailed responses about what's happening with this testimony. And now we're here to try to break it down and try to make sense of it in the overall context. Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome, Jesse.
All right, so now we get back into the conversation. Okay, so we have questions coming in here, Serena and William. Before we even go into what Elizabeth said, we have a question that came in, a super chat question from Nest Dog. So thank you so much, Nest Dog. Serena, I'll throw it to you. I'm not sure I completely understand this question, but it says, if Puffy's return money, is it still extortion? I'm not sure I quite follow that one, but I'll throw it to you, Serena.
You know, I think the import of that testimony, of the fact that Puffy asked them or demanded the $20,000, is less about whether they made out the elements of extortion, and it's more to show how abusive Puff was in that moment. $20,000 for P. Diddy is nothing. It's chump change. But for Cassie and her family, it required them to take out a loan. It just goes to show the kind of control and abuse that he portrayed during that time period, which goes again towards the RICO charge of him controlling this criminal enterprise. And so I think that potentially the defense wanted to argue, you know, we shouldn't hear this testimony, it's irrelevant. Maybe their argument was the money was returned and therefore there was no harm, no foul. But obviously the judge ruled that it was relevant to hear, and I think it goes towards the elements of the RICO charge for sure.
Talking about the questions that we have and money, we have another poll that we put up on YouTube. After the $20 million settlement against Diddy, should Cassie have pursued criminal charges, yes or no? Talk about that in a second. William, I want to go to you. We have another question that came in that I thought was really interesting. This is from the Gemini Lab. Why do you think the defense skipped cross on Regina Ventura? Was that smart strategy or just no ammo?
Oh, I think it was brilliant. Cross-examining a victim's mother is very difficult to do. I don't think there was anything they could gain from her testimony. I actually think that it was exactly what I would have done. I think it's what most defense attorneys would have done. She painted a picture. She emphasized the domestic violence that clearly the defense had already accepted. The defense is almost essentially admitted to, and I think that there was nothing that they could have added in cross-examination. I think that she came across as a sympathetic figure, and I think that cross-examining her would have cut against anything the defense was trying to do.
I have a question from Amanda Tavares, but it's not for any of us, guys. It was actually for Elizabeth Milner, so I can't answer her question. But the question was, I have a question for the esteemed courtroom reporter, whose name currently escapes me, Elizabeth Milner. Given the evidence presented, what is her assessment of the defendant's likelihood of acquittal? So when Elizabeth comes back on here, if she comes back on here, if they should decide not to come back on break, we'll ask her that question. Here's a question from Alexander Mateo for you, Serena. Will they ever show any of the evidence taken from Diddy's homes during the raids?
I would expect that they would. I mean, I think that the evidence that was gotten from his home is going to support this sex trafficking charge, is going to support the lifestyle that they're claiming P. Diddy had and imposed onto other people. I think even the fact of the matter that there were so many bottles of baby oil, for example, and
This shit
Astroglide,
crazy.
I think that shows that it's more.
This
I mean,
shit
we
is
used to
wild.
argue
I
this as
mean,
prosecutors.
you know,
If
he
you
did it
recovered
to
a small amount of
himself.
drugs,
However,
right, the argument
this
is
has
it was
got to be one
personal
of the
use. But if
wildest
you recovered a
RICO
huge
charges
amount of
I've ever
drugs,
heard
now
of.
you're talking about a drug dealer, potential enterprise. And so I think that these are elements of the crime. These are tools of the crime. And I do think that we will learn about what was recovered, and I think they'll use that against him.
It does become a question what we, the public, will see, right? So there were portions of sex tapes that were shown to the jury. As of right now, none of us are going to see that. And I actually, even someone from the media, I would say, I understand. I think that the risk of that getting out and what could be done with that outweighs whatever benefit there might be for a public interest newsworthy exception for us to see it. I get it. It's an important piece of evidence, particularly if you have Combs maybe directing these performances as alleged by prosecutors and the witnesses. But at the same time, this is just such private details, such sensitive material. There is a concern about it getting out and how much the public will see.
They let R. Kelly's get it out.
I have a question here for you, Will. This is from Joe Midori. If Sean Combs is guilty on all allegations, what will be his sentencing?
Well, I think that if you stack everything on top of each other, he's looking at 100+ years. So there's charges here. Obviously, that's not what's going to happen here. If he's found guilty, there will be a pre-sentence report. That's how this works in the federal system. Each of the crimes with which for each crime he's convicted of, there is a range that he could be subjected to. I do think if he's found guilty of everything, it's going to be a considerable sentence, but it's hard to guess exactly what that would look like so far.
Minimum 15 years. Right, minimum 15 years for sex trafficking. He could get life in prison for racketeering. Sure. I mean, that's potentially what he's looking at, and that will, right? I mean, that's exactly why there's so much at stake here.
Without a doubt. I mean, when you look at those numbers, they're sphincter clenching. I mean, this is a considerable sentence here that he could be facing here, which is why. All bets are off, and his lawyers are going to do absolutely everything they can to ensure that he's found guilty.
Got a question from Stas67 for you, Serena. Another question, my question. Diddy found guilty of the RICO charges. Feds get all his assets. What happens to the lawsuits? Feds now have all the money.
Yeah. That is a fair concern. I mean, that's the standard situation that happens in a case like this. The feds will take on the money that was ill-gained, right? And so the lawsuits, I mean, it depends how much other money P. Diddy has, where it is stashed away, how they could potentially gain access to it, whether they end up having to place a lien on some of that, whether he'd have to sell his properties. There might be other ways to access different monies, but for sure the feds are going to want to take all of the ill-gained proceeds.
Remember I said we have a poll up? So the poll was, do you believe David James' testimony helps or hurts Diddy's defense? Remember, former personal assistant to Sean Combs? 62% say it hurts his defense. 37% say it helps his defense. Why do you think we see those numbers here, Will?
I'm not.
Palm Beach Tan is my go-to for keeping that fresh.
Okay, well, there, Pam is a line crime, y'all. Well, I promise you, the goddamn testimony, just listening to it with the voiceovers is exhausting and depleting. God, like Diddy's RICO charge case has got to be like the wildest one I've ever heard in my life. I've never heard a RICO charge consist of all of this stuff that it's got going on. Considering that it was supposed to be a love interest, you know what I'm saying, between him and Cassie. Like, I've heard of X trafficking, RICO charges and what those can consist of. I know how evil those can be. But as far as like this, the way that they're, putting this together is just the wildest shit I've ever heard. Like, I've never heard anything like this. And they're calling it an X, trafficking crime. Like, I don't know. I don't think Diddy's gonna get completely off of this. If it's anything that y'all do know, the feds don't want to be embarrassed. Like, the feds have a 99% conviction rate. If the feds come get you, they come to get you. It's only 1% of people in the world that have ever beat the feds. Do I think Diddy has no shot at beating the feds? No. I think he has a great opportunity. I think he does have the best attorneys to do it. Do I think that they will allow Diddy to completely beat the feds? No. I kind of want to go out on a limb and say he will probably do 3 to 5 years in the feds. I don't think Diddy will get a lot of time. I think that they're going to give, now that I'm listening to testimony and witnesses and stuff, Cassie's lawsuit made us all believe that made us all believe that there was an X trafficking charge, criminal, syndicate thing going on. Now that they're in court, it's not looking like the lawsuit matches the testimony we're getting. So, I mean, I don't know. I think they might try to get him on some of the, transporting of a prostitute. You know what I'm saying? I don't necessarily think it's gonna be much more. I just don't know. I don't know. But I will be here to the end to see.
Particular role was, what he saw, when he saw it. Obviously, the defense attorneys were able to score some points. His lawyers are absolutely fantastic, and they know what they're doing. That's certainly for sure. But I think that his testimony was damaging.
Got a question here from Zen Pi. What witnesses are the defense calling? Do we know? We don't know, right? We don't know, Serena. The witness list has actually been sealed. I'm not surprised in the case, given these allegations and the sensitivities, and also the allegations that Combs was trying to improperly contact at least one witness in this case. But who do you think the defense will call, or maybe should call, in a sex trafficking, racketeering, prostitution trial?
Well, I think we're already seeing a really good preview of who they will call and should call. I honestly think the more people that they have, well, I don't want to say the more, it's really a matter of quality versus quantity. I think when a prosecution is going to go forward with a case like this, they really need to parse out who they're going to put on the stand, who will be their best witnesses. As you can see, every witness has pros and cons. And some of the people who interacted in these freak-offs are not going to be necessarily the most stand-up people. And so if you're a prosecutor, you need to have the jury trust you and trust your witnesses. If you're putting up criminals or people who are really not going to make a great impression on a jury, then you have to reconsider whether you want to put them on or not. The prosecution is going to put as many
to pour this tea. Get your teacups ready. I think the only reason why Diddy paid her is for her not to write a book. I think he just didn't want these details of his life outlined in a book for everybody to read. You know, it would have been very humiliating. So I think that that's why, oh shit, I don't want no goddamn book about this shit he's been doing, you know, type situation. I don't think it was because he thought that, you know what I'm saying, she would sit down and shut up and not file RICO charges on him. I don't think Diddy thought he would get RICO charges from that shit that he was doing with Cassie. I just don't. So
many witnesses as they need to hit the elements of the crime, and I think no more than that. You don't want to put too many people on and overdo it.
I think that they're really going to focus on the idea that Cassandra Ventura was, in their view, a willing participant, right? The more that they could try to say that she encouraged the freak-offs, coordinated the freak-offs, didn't object to the freak-offs, the more that they say consent, which could be a valuable, valid defense in this case. That's how you get against sex trafficking. That's might be what we hear. Remember I mentioned we have another poll. So after the $20 million settlement against Diddy, should Cassie have pursued criminal charges? Out of the people polled up on YouTube, 75% say yes, 24% say no. I'm not surprised by that, Will. Look, I think the defense spent a lot of time focusing on the settlement, right? Potential financial incentive for her to go after Diddy, but she settled with him and then cooperated with the government. I think my timeline is right about that, which goes to the question, what would be her incentive? To have to testify in front of him, put this story out there, face potential backlash from people online. Why cooperate with the government? I mean, it's not like she has a pending lawsuit, and the argument could be, well, you know, she would benefit from a favorable decision here. She already settled. She's got the money. I mean, so the idea would be, if she really felt that, or really believes, and it's true that these are crimes that were committed against her, why wouldn't she cooperate with the government? So are you surprised by the 75%, 24%?
I mean, I look at it this way. According to the government, a crime was committed here, and she's not the only victim of the crime. There are other individuals who were sex trafficked. My understanding is there are other victims who are going to be testifying. I think that one of them is using the name Jane. I believe one of them is using the name Mia. The third Jane Doe victim that doesn't have a name attributed to her yet. So from an esoteric standpoint, if crimes occurred, regardless of a settlement against an individual, they still may want to go forward with the prosecution. There's another piece to this, which is she also conspired to some extent. You know, we heard James testify that he had a proffer letter, which essentially means that the government allowed him to come in, talk about everything he was going to testify to ahead of time, perhaps in lieu of criminal charges against himself. I don't think that Cassie was in the same position, but she potentially had some culpability here. If she was arranging these freak-offs, if she was organizing, if she was perhaps soliciting other women to come into the freak-offs, if she was soliciting men to participate in the freak-offs, she has some culpability here. So there could be other reasons why she was encouraging, or why she was encouraged to go forward with the criminal prosecution.
And by the way, James testified that he wasn't really sure of the details that were brokered by his attorney. He believes he signed a proffer agreement, you know, a type of agreement that gives a person some protection from the prosecution. Not surprising in a racketeering conspiracy case. Excuse me. Combs can't do this by himself. He can't operate this criminal enterprise by himself, and he's the only one charged in this indictment. So you imagine the people who, the employees, the security, the assistants, they would be questioned about immunity deals or proffer agreements or things of that nature. Otherwise, why aren't they charged alongside him? So I'm not surprised by that. I want to go to you, Serena. We got a question from Spencer Campbell. Does the $20,000 demanded by Combs show intimidation and threatening to release the tapes? That's a good question. So the idea, this was coming up before, in Regina Combs had demanded $20,000 from Cassie, release the tapes. He was upset she was with someone else. Does that help prove one of the underlying crimes in racketeering? Does it prove sex trafficking? Maybe not, but maybe underlying crime in racketeering, no?
Absolutely.
While they are paying bills, we are wrapping up the day with some concluding testimony and theories on the Diddy trial, day 7. We've had a lot of testimony go on, y'all. Thank you so much for sipping tea. When you come in and get your tea cups filled up, don't forget to like and subscribe with your butt. Thank you.
It shows not only, like I said, that he was abusive and that he had total control over Cassie and her family, and probably other people. But yes, it's another underlying crime, or at least an attempt at an underlying crime. It could be bribery. And also, if you think about it in more modern terms, it's essentially revenge porn, right? That he was essentially saying, if you don't pay me the $20,000, I'm going to release this pornographic material of you, which is a crime as well. So I do think it's
a crime. Yes, it is. But is it punishable by the lengths of law that y'all are trying to give Diddy's ass? What could he get? Time served for that shit? You see what I'm saying? And we heard the grandma say it, but did she prove it? She said it. Did she prove it? Did she prove that ex tried to extort her for an ex tape? And he gave it back. I'm not negating that it happened. It sounds like some shit that you would probably definitely do. But can she prove it? Anybody can say anything. I mean, this is somebody's life, regardless of if we don't care for Diddy. Diddy is, if we don't care for how Diddy is carrying along, these freak offs and all of that, it ain't my mouth. So not for nothing, I can say how disgusting it is. It's their mouth, it's their assholes. If that's what they want to do with them, that's their fucking prerogative. But I'm saying, as far as prosecuting him and then persecuting him, you know what I'm saying? You need proof. You need proof to put somebody away in the feds. You're supposed to have proof to put anybody away in prison ever, but in this country, we really, we see people go to prison all the time for crimes they don't commit, which is why they have the, justice offender program, however have you, that helps people that really are innocent get exonerated. So, not for nothing, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I heard grandma say it. I'm not saying I don't believe it happened, because we've heard a lot and we've seen a lot with Diddy over the past 30 to 40 years. But can she prove it?
of the RICO charges.
Okay. We're always trying to figure out what the prosecution's case here, always matching what the testimony is to the elements. That's the key here. Okay. Question for you, Will, from Chris Bono. If Combs wants to take the stand and his lawyers don't want him to, what happens? He takes the stand?
Takes the stand. He takes the stand. Whether or not an individual chooses to testify is one of the decisions that an attorney can advise on, but there's nothing an attorney can do to stop it. So if I have a client who's insisting on testifying, no matter how bad an idea I think that is, they get to testify. If I have a client who I really, really think should testify, and it's going to make or break the case, and they refuse to testify, there's nothing I can do about that either. It's one of those decisions that solely belongs to the client.
And let me ask you this. You think he's going to testify?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
That's why people ask.
I don't think so.
Serena?
I don't think so either, although it is tempting to get up there on a case where you're arguing consent. A lot of times a jury wants to hear your side of the story. But if he's smart, he'll stay off the stand, in my opinion.
Serena, I'm going to go to you. We have another question. This is from Martina Masadas. After hearing today's testimony, do you think the justice system is finally catching up to the power and protection that figures like Diddy have had for years? Well, Martina, I'll say I think I know which way you stand in this case. I think a lot of people have already resolved themselves in terms of whether or not Diddy's guilty or not. But what do you think? After hearing today's testimony, Serena, do you think the justice system is finally catching up to the power and protection that figures like Diddy have had for years?
Yeah, I mean, that's supposing that he is actually guilty. Right? That's what Jesse is alluding to, that you've made up your mind, and that's fair. That's a fair position to take. I do think it's encouraging to see the justice system go after powerful players. I have said this for many, many years. I include even Harvey Weinstein in my opinion. I think that the justice system has turned its back on victims for a very long time in favor of people who are powerful, rich, and who potentially contribute to, favors within the government. And so it is kind of nice if they actually did have that against him, which it seems the proof is piling up, that they were willing to go full force against him and take that to the courtroom and let a jury of his peers decide his fate.
Got a question here from Leo Senpai, excuse me. This is for you, Will. Does the assistant's testimony, meaning David James, does the assistant's testimony about Diddy and Suge Knight squash the Diddy unalived Biggie talk?
I don't know that I can answer that. I'll say this. I think it was interesting testimony. I think from a gossip sort of standpoint, fascinating. I don't know how much it adds to this particular case. I really don't. But I do think that that component of Mr. James's testimony may become the lead story and tabloids, if you will. That Diddy was went back home, got a gun, went back, and they were essentially hunting Suge Knight. I think that's interesting. I think it's fascinating from a sort of prurient standpoint. I don't really know how much it adds to this particular case.
I think it's important. I think it's important. First of all, it came up during Cassandra Ventura's lawsuit. That was the first time the allegation came out. But Serena, I think it's important because it goes to the racketeering, right? Look at this environment she was around. Guns, violence, threats, security. I mean, if you're thinking about why she didn't leave, and you're thinking about force, fraud, coercion for sex trafficking, if you're thinking about the different elements of a criminal enterprise that Sean Combs was the head of, this could be important, even though it doesn't directly affect her. It makes up a portion of it, no?
It gives incredible context to the the situation. And I like this information because it takes it out of the world of simply, the freak offs and the sex parties. I think that if P. Diddy is trying to argue that this was all consensual, there is a gray area when it comes to these freak offs and kinkiness and sex. Okay, but what about the guns and the threats and the drugs? I like the fact that the prosecution is highlighting other things so that it really gives a greater context and it colors in those
guys
blank spots
have? They
with respect
do.
to just how pervasive the
I
criminal
believe
activity
they do
was
have some guns.
in this.
I believe they do have some guns. I don't know how much drugs they have, but I do believe they have some uns, right? They have some luns, because I don't know if we could say GUNs on YouTube. I don't know. But I believe they have some. I believe they got some from Diddy's raids, right? I don't know about the drugs though. Like, they arrested him with some. Is it enough to give Diddy the type of time y'all talking about? Life. Is it enough to give him life? I don't believe so, because they would have charged him with that when they arrested him. They would have said, oh, Diddy had a couple of keys on him, and we're going to add that to this RICO charge. So, he probably had enough for personal consumption between him and his freak off partners. Okay, so I don't know.
Enterprise.
Got a poll up here. Do you think the jury will be swayed to guilty by the images of Diddy's freak-offs? 74% say yes, Will. 25% say no. What do you make of that?
I'm not surprised. I mean, again,
I don't necessarily believe that. Hold on. I'm into pause so
this
I
trial
can
that we, the public, will never see.
I don't necessarily believe that if the freak off tapes only show BDSM and him, directing, even if it's him like, get your ass over here. And she's like, yes, daddy. You see what I'm saying? That the jury of seasoned veteran in age, mind, wisdom people that more than likely are experienced in X, no matter what level it's on, they've had X before in their life, right? We'll see that as X trafficking. You see what I'm saying? Even, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't see it. Not with 4 black men, 4 white men, and 4 black women. I don't see them doing that. Anybody can have a moment with Cassie. Said she was his lover. She said she was, you know what I'm saying, somebody that always wanted more with Diddy. She wanted to be Diddy's wife. Okay, so I mean, I know ex-afflict victims that want to be the wives of their captors. But not for nothing. That's what she said. That's what she said. She wanted to be his wife. She always wanted to step out from under the freak offs and step onto, over the broom and marry Diddy. So, even at that level of the highest BDSM, the high promiscuity of her and Diddy, all 4 or 5 days they was freaking off, just being the freakest of weeks, right? If nobody's in there like, oh my God, no, Diddy, please, Diddy, no, Diddy, no. You see what I'm saying? Then I don't see why they would say that they were doing it against their will, because that's what against somebody's will sounds like. You see what I'm saying? Now, if during the freak-offs, Cassie said that he would physically assault her during the freak-offs, what if that was a part of their kink? Because after they got into the fight at the Intercontinental Hotel, he said, I don't want another, Friday like that. And she said, neither do I, Daddy. Laugh out loud. Laugh out. What's funny? If somebody that I was intimate with and I was like in a lover relationship, like we were lovable, we were lovers, you know what I'm saying? Not even exclusive or anything like that, but we were if he beat me stir crazy, I would not be nice to him at all. At all. I wouldn't be laughing. It would not be a matter of a joke to me. That's me. I don't know about Cassie. I don't know why she laughed about it, because it wasn't funny. You see what I'm saying? So she laughed about it. What if it was something that they just, had as a part of their little act they had on the road? It's unfortunate because it looks very much like, he was battering her. But if it was something that was accepted between him and her, you see what I'm saying? And then who in the hell are we to say that it was anything different? And she never called the police on him. So it's like, who are we to say anything different about Cassie shrugging it off until it became, it's time to get paid. Put on that act. Put it on, put it on, put it on. You see what I'm saying? So, and please trust me, believe me, I don't care for Diddy. I never cared for Diddy like that. Okay, not at all. So he was just never my cup of tea. But he's a human being and he deserves reciprocity, however you say that word. Okay, he deserves a fair understanding and outcome. Even if he does do things that I would never think about doing or anything like that. If I had $1 billion or no fucking dollars, I would not allow someone to pee in my mouth. You see what I'm saying? So what? But that's the lifestyle they were living. Whatever. What type of trafficked person begs for someone to urinate in them? That's just disgusting. Now you would think, ex-affect people have those type of, things done to them, unfortunately. And so do people that, are in the world of the BDSMs and all of that type of shit, into fetishes and stuff. There was a girl that went over to Dubai. Right? She went to Dubai and she got paid $50,000 to have somebody defecate on her. Shit. He took a shit on her and paid her 50 grand. Okay, he didn't ex-traffic her. She willingly went to Dubai and had this done to her. You see what I'm saying? And so I just say, if it's going to be what it's going to be, and y'all got what it's going to take to put Diddy in jail, in the feds, club fed, it's gonna need to be some evidence, because right now this is not evidence. We, the public opinion, the jury of public opinion, or however, we're not buying it. And I don't care for Diddy. You see what I'm saying? Like, shit, if he did it like his ass up. I don't care for Diddy. So I, just don't see it so far with what's been. Y'all got escorts up there saying that they were in love with Diddy and Cassie, that sometimes they would do freak offs for free just because they enjoyed them so much. That's not them ex-trafficking people. Y'all, oh God, I'm gonna just let this play because it's just frustrating. Y'all frustrating. Y'all frustrating. If somebody's willingly somewhere like, "Ooh, please, girl, where my phone at? Girl, Diddy done may call me all week, girl. I know they popping. I know they doing something. They always got something going on. Where they at? Oh, shit. Who is it? Diddy in it. That's not sex trafficking. If a person is ex-trafficked, they are somewhere trying to be completely far away from anybody realizing that somebody may be looking for them. So, I mean, y'all, shit. I don't know. Girl. I don't know. My computer's been acting up all day.
Said before, Jesse, nor should we. It's some very private, personal, sexual escapades that went on, perhaps that were coerced. And I think that the jury.
I don't know about the coerced. I have not heard coercion yet. I have not heard that. Where, you know what I'm saying? He's like having to intimidate people. You better get your ass over here and freak off with me and Cassie tonight. Don't you play no games with us. We'll come around there and fuck you up. I don't hear that. I don't know. Maybe the jury's hearing that. We're not hearing that with the testimony that's running back outside, giving us, the minute by minute plays in the courtroom. We're not hearing that. I don't hear that. I don't hear coercion. I hear the escorts saying that they are anticipating the phone call for Diddy to call them because they're having such a great time. And they're not even charging Diddy no real money. And I'm very surprised that shit, $800. This is Diddy. Like, shit, you better be trying to pull some Kardashian money up out that motherfucker. I don't get y'all. And then you got him in there freaking for 3-4 days? You getting $6,000 from Diddy? Girl. I just don't see it. I don't see the level of ex-trafficking y'all are trying to get Diddy on. This is some low-level bullshit. He was not spending that kind of money on prostitutes. If Kim Kardashian can go to Dubai and get a motherfucker to give her, what was it, $500,000 to just show up at his birthday party? Y'all only pulling $800, $1,200, $6,000 out of Diddy for a week to 3 weeks? Are y'all crazy? That ain't no goddamn high level racketeering, ex-trafficking money. I don't see it. I don't know what's going. Diddy got money. He, Forbes billionaire, but he wasn't paying the host that kind of money. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I think y'all want Diddy because Diddy done offended somebody up in the high ups where he's playing at with his money. And you know what I'm saying? They said, let's see, we know Diddy dirty money. We know that. So we gonna try to tie some shit together and see what the fuck sticks on this motherfucker. And he been playing all these 30, 40 years. We can find something on Diddy. And I think that y'all jumped the gun. Y'all should have probably tried to charge Diddy in state. Because I don't really see y'all having no Fed case on Diddy currently. I ain't seen no kilos, no real hoes, no. I don't know about the little guns or whatever. Is Diddy a felon? If Diddy's a felon, he can get drugged or gun fed time in the feds for guns, depending on what level of felon he is. I don't think Diddy's even been to jail. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, okay. I mean, he could go to jail or not. He can go to prison for having some AR field if they're unlicensed and he's unregistered. Because it's not illegal to have certain guns. I don't know about the state laws where he was. If they were in California, I know in New York it is. Now he could have went to prison in New York for having certain guns and shit in his mansions if they're not registered and he's not supposed to carry them for whatever purpose. But y'all not charging him in the state. You're charging him in the federal courts of New York. So I don't know. This is very confusing to all of us. And not all of us like Diddy. Because I don't care for Diddy.
Going to put them out there. That's tough. It's going to be tough evidence to watch, and it's going to be tough evidence to overcome.
Serena, a question from Ashley Glass. Hey, Jesse, will D-Rock be called into this case as his
Who
name
is
is
D-Rock,
mentioned a lot?
girl?
I think
Just one of
there's
them
a
niggas
strong
that Diddy had
likelihood he's
around
got
here.
it. Right? I mentioned it before, Serena. How do you have a racketeering case without having the assistants and the bodyguards take the stand, be that connective tissue between Combs and alleged criminal activity? His name has been mentioned a lot, just like Bonds has.
The bodyguard or somebody?
I think the fact that D-Rock's name was mentioned is a clue potentially that he will be taking the stand. Again, I think the prosecution wants to whittle down the number of witnesses just so that it doesn't get overwhelming and so that there's no opportunity to have witnesses contradict each other. That's always the issue sometimes when you have too many witnesses take the stand. But I agree. I think D-Rock was close enough to the activity to be able to be an effective witness. Then again, we have to, I would expect that the prosecution in prepping him would want to weigh the good and the bad that
so
he
what is D-Rock going to testify to? I know we're 7 days. We're actually one total week into Diddy's trial. So we're kind of anxious, right? We're anxious for whatever the hell Diddy could be brought up about Diddy. Excuse me, I got hay Kiva. But not for nothing. It's like, what is the bodyguard going to say? Is he going to say things in collaboration with what Cassie and the escorts have already been saying? Because if he is, that's not much of anything. Is he going to be like, yeah, you know, I've done things for Diddy. I've hid bodies for Diddy. I've broken bones for Diddy. I've carried things for Diddy. I've carried out missions for Diddy. Like real shit, real mobster shit that y'all saying Diddy is. You know. So, I mean, what is he really going to say? Like, yeah, you know, I transported people for Diddy. I put them in a van. They came, you know, I had to get them. They had to come. And you know, it was against their will. They didn't want to come. We had to drug them to get them and bring them in. Yeah, I made, you know, sure Diddy wanted. He always had to have what he wanted. We always had to make Diddy happy. If he's not coming with that, what is he coming with? Because if he's coming with that pussy pillow bullshit that Cassie and them escorts been talking about, we're not going to care. We're not going to give a fuck. Like, okay, so. Because we know what they could potentially be bringing if he's getting up there testifying against his boss. That means he's ratting on Diddy. So he better not get up there with no hoe shit. You see what I'm saying? If it's finna be some real shit, because if he gets on the stand, he's a rat, no matter what he talk about. No matter what he talk about. But, okay. In the court side of the situation, right? From the court side of the situation, he better come with some real shit to make a jury see that Diddy should have been charged with what the feds came for him for. Or if he's, you know, if they make him subpoena, if they subpoena him and they make him get up there, then he better try to keep it to where the escorts and Cassie were with that shit, so he's not so much looked like as a rat in the streets, and he can still, if in the event Diddy gets off and walks the fuck out the door, he ain't looking at him crazy. Okay, so I mean, he gonna play it one or two ways. So, yeah.
Present as a witness if he's going to be too detrimental because of the fact that, you know, he might be too close to Diddy. He might give him a pass. He might say things that help the defense. The prosecution has to weigh the pros and cons of that witness. But I do think that he's essential to the narrative.
One of the reasons I love doing this lunchtime show, other than speaking to my great guests and taking amazing questions from our viewers, which we appreciate so much, is that the timing of this is great. Why? Because we get to go back live in court. So court is back, and we are going to provide you real-time updates about the testimony that's happening. Again, no cameras, no audio equipment, but we're going to give you in real time what's happening. So the questioning of this alleged sex worker, this male performer, Sheree Hayes, the Punisher, has continued by the prosecution. They asked him, how are these sessions scheduled? Hayes responds, I'd be reached out to at 5 or 7 p.m. for later. They'd ask for a sexy scene, but I knew it would be more. How would it start? Hayes responds, baby oil, a sexy atmosphere, Mr. Combs would direct. Why is this important? Well,
again, if Combs is the one who's conducting, if he's the one who's directing, that goes right to the racketeering charges. It puts him right in the middle of all of it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very consistent with what the physical evidence is, consistent with the testimonial evidence. I think the jury's in a position where they're going to have to, where they might actually say, okay, we're confident about certain things, right? We're confident, right, Serena, we're confident that he abused Cassandra Ventura, that he physically abused her. The testimony, the video, the pictures, corroborating testimony, I think they also had freak-offs. There's no denying about it. It's just, what does that amount to? Does that amount to racketeering or sex trafficking? Those are the questions. So here's another important question. We got it from Mikey John. This is for you, Serena. Whatever Cassie's role was of either victim or co-conspirator, do you think there's enough evidence to convict him even without her? That's an interesting question. So if the jury says we're awash with her, we don't know what to believe, what not to believe, everything else, well, can they convict him still of racketeering? Can they convict him still of sex trafficking of victim one, meaning Cassandra Ventura? What do you think?
I think without her testimony, it would be very difficult. You need somebody who was victimized in this situation, that being Cassie. We'll see who else comes forward. But I don't think a jury can find beyond a reasonable doubt that certain elements of these crimes were committed without having an actual victim that they believe was victimized.
Will, how does the defense, this is my question, how does the defense properly defend against transportation to engage in prostitution? There are two charges there with respect to two alleged victims. So basically, it's that Combs would have transported sex workers and alleged victims with the intent for prostitution. There's not threats needed, there's not force needed, there's not coercion needed. You know, she had testified that these people were paid, that she had freak-offs in different locations, that there was at least one sex worker who was used in multiple cities. How does the defense defend against this?
That he isn't the one who transported her, that he had nothing to do with who came to the freak-offs. We know the freak-offs occurred. We know, I mean, the defense said in the very, very beginning, Attorney Garagos in her fantastic opening statement, that the case is about voluntarily adult choices made by capable adults in a consensual relationship. So essentially what the defense to that would have to be is that he wasn't involved in procuring anyone. He came into these situations as they were, and as he texted back and forth with Cassie, he loved being in these situations, but he had nothing to do with bringing folks from point A to point B and didn't know who was going to be there at all. He also had nothing to do with paying them in any way, shape, or form. That's the defense.
So we go back to, well, the defense also said, I think in their opening statement, hey, paid them for their time and experience, not for sex work. Maybe, you know, he enjoyed the stories that they had to tell and their companionship. All right, so anyway, continuing on with live updates from court, the continuation of the questioning of the Punisher, Sheree Hayes, one of these alleged sex workers. Prosecutor asks, how did the direction work? And he responds, Mr. Combs might say, sit forward, move the camera, or what would happen sexually. You know, one time during sex, he dropped a stack of money. He said, I like this S, okay? Then there's this one. How much baby oil did you use? And Hayes said, a lot. We were supposed to be glistening as much as possible. How long would they last? 4 hours, a lot of waiting, maybe 40 minutes or so. It's supposed to finish in a, sorry, this is graphic. He was supposed to, I'm gonna leave that part out. Just let's say that they completed in a very specific way. So reading that in real time, apologies. Okay, so Serena, as we're reading this, you have to wonder if it is quite intense and it is prolonged, and you know, Cassandra Ventura testified last week about being urinated on, yet there was testimony from somebody who said she instructed the worker to do that. But you have to wonder, the more elaborate these are, does the jury say, how on earth was she able to actually consent to this? Did she really consent to this? And it goes to the psychological defense, that while on paper it might have looked like she consented, are there coping strategies at play? Are there traumatic issues at play? I think the more the prosecution establishes how strange and elaborate and intense these sessions were, it does beg the question, was it really consensual?
Right. And when you're prosecuting a case, you can provide as much information, evidence, and facts to a jury as you possibly can. But at the end of the day, when they stand up and go back to that deliberation room, it's up to them to think about all of it and to use their common sense and make reasonable inferences from the evidence. You can't put everything into their minds. You can only kind of influence them as best you can with the evidence that you have, and then ask them not to leave their common sense at the door. Go back there, and what do you think this 19-year-old girl was thinking during this, during these freak offs by this very powerful man? They have to a little bit substitute their own position and try to think about what reasonable conclusions they could make. So I agree, Jesse. I think giving them all of this information is so important so that they could dissect it later and recognize, hey, maybe it looked consensual, but nobody would have consented to that.
Serena, I'm going to give you another question because this is a question from abroad by Sarah Senna, and it's just so similar to your name. I said, why don't you get this question? Will the defense bring any witnesses to the stand at all, or only the prosecution?
An excellent question. And it goes back a little bit to whether P. Diddy himself will testify. He obviously, as William said, has the right to make that decision all his own. So he could be somebody who takes the stand. We don't know. That being said, again, on these types of situations where you're saying it was consensual, someone's going to have to stand up for Diddy. Someone's going to have to get up there and say, I actually saw it happening this way. It wasn't what the prosecution said. Now, the defense could try to flip some of those prosecution witnesses to make those statements. And I guess what we like to say is turn that witness into their own witness and have them support the defense without the defense having to put their own witnesses on. But I think by the close of evidence of the prosecution's case, the defense will have to decide, were we able to damage the prosecution's witnesses enough? Were we able to flip enough witnesses to our side? Or do we have to put on our own case and put some of these people on that will help the consent argument?
Okay, so we have more questions coming in. We got a question from Michael Mendoza. How can the public see the court daily transcript? Well, I'll tell you what. Here at Law and Crime, we actually have the show Scandal with Sierra Gillespie. She's actually recounting much of the transcript from each day. We also, by the way, are kind of experimenting with AI, and we're doing recreations of key moments of this trial using the full transcript. So everybody check out Law and Crime's YouTube as we try to give you an in-depth analysis of the transcript. Okay, question from, this is interesting. Will, I'll go to you. So we had a question for the poll. We had a poll for all of our viewers. Do you think Diddy will take the stand? 62% say no, 37% say yes. Will, your reaction to that?
I mean, I think we want him to take the stand. I think we as observers, I think we as the public would love to hear what he has to say. From a legal standpoint, though, my advice to him would be to not testify.
Yeah, I don't think, Serena, he took the stand in his trial 25 years ago regarding the nightclub shooting. It worked out well for him.
That's right, it did. He had a great defense attorney, Ben Brofman. Mark Agnifilo used to work with Ben Brofman, and so he's still kind of got that thread of great attorneys fighting for him. And yes, he did take the stand. I do think it was a very different situation back then. I think there's just so much evidence that he could be confronted with in this case that it would be a tragedy for him to take the stand here. I think with a gun case, you could make certain arguments that are compelling, and the follow-up is not going to be as damaging as it would here.
So we've been talking so much about how there's no cameras, there's no audio equipment. We got a question from Vanessa. Why do you think the press hasn't been able to capture the photos of Diddy? We've seen photos of Luigi Mangione, but why not Diddy? Well, first of all, Luigi Mangione, they've able to capture photos of him going into court, but I think they've also captured photos of him in state court. I can't confirm they've captured photos of him in federal court, which goes to a different question, Will, right? Why no photos? Why no cameras? Why no audio equipment in federal court? What's the deal?
I mean, it certainly is frustrating. It has been a longstanding practice in federal court, in all federal courts, not to have TV cameras in the courtroom. It's something that, candidly, I don't understand. I think in this day and age, it's something we expect. I mean, the United States Supreme Court is hearing arguments every day that matter to thousands, if not, to millions and millions of people. And I think it would be great if the public were able to observe those arguments take place, all the way filtering down to cases like this. I don't understand it, other than the fact that it's just simply been the longstanding tradition.
Got a question here from Nicole. I'll throw it to you, Serena. Look, I will say one of the big pieces of interest in this case is who else will be named, or what celebrities are attached. Same thing what we saw in Jeffrey Epstein, right? Which brings you to this question. This is a question from Nicole. For example, if other celebs are found as co-conspirators, would they also be tried, or is this solely focusing on Diddy?
It's a great question, and this goes towards the idea of prosecutorial discretion. Sometimes there's an appetite by prosecutors to prosecute, and sometimes there's not. I think we can all think of instances in our lives where we know that something was wrong. We know somebody committed a crime, and yet they were not prosecuted. Sometimes the prosecution just wants to focus on the biggest fish of all, especially the feds. They like a good win. They do not like to lose. They do not like to risk that. And so if P. Diddy was the biggest fish of all, then they might just gather up all of the other people, flip them, give them proffer agreements, as we mentioned earlier, and get as much evidence as possible against the big fish. So depending on what they would uncover about those other celebrities, they may or may not have the appetite to prosecute them.
Yeah, and I never seemed clear to me that Combs was going to take a deal and flip and turn on people, because whatever deal he would have been offered, it would have been significant prison time, I think. And also, by the way, it seems to me the prosecution is very specific and narrow with this case, because if you were to go after Diddy, hypothetically, in a trial where every single allegation about him came to, you could bring up, right? He's facing how many lawsuits right now? The trial would take, what, 10 years? So they're very specific right now on what the charges are and who's a part of this. We have I just saw it right here. Where is it? Okay, we have an update from court. Will, would you like to have an evidentiary question? Would you help explain it to the audience?
Sure.
Okay. So this just happened in court. The prosecutor asked Sheree Harris, again, this apparent sex worker, then what? He responds, she would leave with Mr. Combs 10 or 15 minutes. She'd return in a bathrobe and pay me $2,000 or $1,200 cash. Prosecutor asks, did you think Miss Ventura was enjoying herself? And immediately an objection from Sean Combs' defense counsel. Now, I know why they're asking that, right? Because they would love for him to say, she seemed like this was the last thing she wanted to do. She seemed like she was being forced into this. She hated it, right? Great for sex trafficking allegations, but objection, and the objection was sustained. Why was there an objection, and why was it sustained, Will?
Well, there was an objection because, for the reasons you just said, the defense attorney certainly doesn't want to know the answer to that question, because what if the answer was no? It was obvious that she was in fear. It was obvious she didn't want to be there. It was obvious that this was the last thing in the world she wanted to do. It was sustained, I'm going to guess, because it probably called for hearsay. So unless there was something that the Punisher could testify to regarding how she conveyed that she was into it, which I don't think the judge knew the answer to, it wouldn't be allowed in. So anything that she would say to the Punisher during the course of the sexual encounter would be, I would consider it hearsay, and wouldn't be allowed in.
Good try, prosecution. Not today for the defense. It's interesting to see that back and forth. Okay. Rod from Saracena says, oh, thank you so much for reading my question, Jesse. I'm so happy. You're welcome. Thanks so much for submitting the question. Question for you, Serena, from Beat. At what point do you think the prosecution's going to bring in mental health experts to explain why Cassie stayed? And let's just do a little self-promotion here. We did a whole sidebar episode on this. Came out yesterday. Encourage everybody to check it out about the potential mental health defense. I was talking to Dr. Daniel Bober about it. Okay, but I throw to you, Serena. When do you think they're going to call mental health experts?
Well, I think they have to definitely call a mental health expert to explain things like a delayed outcry, the length of time it took for her to say something was going on, and also her state of mind that must have been during these acts, and why she might have acted in a way that seemingly incongruous to somebody who's not consenting to it. When is a great question. I think somebody like that, a mental health expert, is easier to kind of schedule, unless they're very busy, of course, but easier in the sense that they're not a witness. They're not somebody who's scared to testify. They're not 8 months pregnant. So somebody like that could be seen as almost like a filler, so that they can work around the schedules of the witnesses who are a little bit more difficult to schedule, and just put that person in there, whenever there's a blank spot. So I don't know when, but it's probably some time where is convenient for all.
I think it's key testimony. I think it's going to be imperative testimony to understand Cassandra Ventura's alleged statements, behavior, actions. Which brings me, Serena, I'll throw one more question at you. This is from Leg 7K. It's the same thing. Will the psychologist take the stand and be cross-examined? Also, could it be possible more than one doctor on the stand? So we believe Dr. Dawn Hughes is going to testify for the prosecution. She had testified in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. She's not going to be able to testify about coercive control, but she'll be able to talk about coping strategies, why a victim stays with an abuser. Do you think so? So is she going to take the stand, and will she be cross-examined? And will there be more than one doctor?
Yes, yes. So yes, I think that there will potentially be what's called a battle of experts, right? You'll have two different doctors saying two different things. And I do for sure think she'll be cross-examined. They'll probably cross-examine her on the fact that she did not specifically analyze Cassie herself. These experts are able to testify about essentially ideas and things that they've seen in their practice, but they don't specifically analyze or meet with the victim themselves. And so I would probably cross-examine her on that, the fact that she can't specifically opine as to what Cassie herself was actually thinking, because she never interviewed or analyzed Cassie herself. She wasn't there. She couldn't know. And then, of course, our favorite cross-examination questions, which are about financials, right? How much are you getting paid to be here? How much are you getting paid to say what you're saying? How much were you prepped by the prosecution, or on the other side by the defense? A jury definitely takes that into account. They don't love hired guns. And so it'll be interesting to see the battle of the experts when the doctors get up on the stand and see kind of who's credible and who's not.
I was on air the other day with Mark Garagos on News Nation, and I brought up Dr. Dawn Hughes' testimony, and he goes, wait a minute, wasn't she the one who testified for Amber Heard? Meaning, like, that didn't work out so well for her. I get it. Got an update from court. This is from the prosecutor. Again, question Sheree Hayes. Did you use drugs? Hayes responds, I'm not a marijuana smoker, but I did pull a Bill Clinton. I was handed a joint. Prosecutor asks, did you have performance issues? Hayes responds, having the woman's partner there, yes. The question then is, did the issues affect your pay? Objection. Will, what's that about?
I don't know. I think that, well, I don't know.
I'll tell you what. We got another update from court. I'll give it to you. So the judge said overruled. Sheree Hayes says, I wasn't sure how they calculated it. One time, Mr. Combs threw condoms on the couch next to us. I struggled. It was a failure. Prosecutor says, what happened? Hayes says, they went out. He did something. She came back and thanked me for privacy. I don't know. What is this about? I'm still confused. Will, I'll go to you.
I think that it sounds as if the questions have to do with what does the punisher need to do in order to get compensated, is what I think the question is. I think it's irrelevant, and I think that that's why the objections may have been sustained, but I'm guessing.
Serena?
I think it's going towards the prosecution's ability to argue that Diddy controlled everything, and that if people didn't do exactly what he wanted Diddy to do, then they would have suffered consequences. Again, the question of, if you didn't perform this way, would it affect your pay, goes to Diddy's control over his compensation. That if he didn't act the way that Diddy wanted him to act, that he wasn't going to get paid, he was going to lose his job, and maybe worse. So I think that that's what they're trying to establish.
Got a question from Philly PA Girl. Does anyone know how many women are on the jury? 4 women, 8 men. That's our count. Okay, got a question here from Abry Strauss. I'll throw it to you, Serena. If the prosecution offered Cassie a deal to turn evidence against Diddy or face charges for complicity, would the public be told?
Well, I think that the public would find that out just based on the cross-examination. I mean, if that's what ended up happening and it was disclosed because it needs to be disclosed, then as a defense attorney, I would be questioning her about that. It makes you what's called an interested witness. It gives you a reason to testify in a way to testify for the prosecution in their favor. So I think we would probably have heard about the conditions, or at least some of the conditions of that, had she been cooperating. But I think it's a great question, because I also think the prosecution needed to make a decision. and decide, is Cassie a victim or a co-conspirator?
Going back to a poll that we put up on YouTube, do you think Diddy's family's presence in court provides him a sense of confidence? Will, 65% say yes, 34% say no. So having a victim's family there, taking this poll stats, it does have an effect on the defendant, right?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. I mean, usually whoever's in the audience has an effect on the defendant. If a defendant's entire family is there, that certainly helps. That certainly provides some sense of confidence. If a defendant's family is missing from a trial, it makes a person feel alone. Similarly, if a victim's entire family is there, that provides them with some confidence. And again, if none of the victim's family is there, they also feel alone. So I think it's those psychological components of a trial that have nothing to do with evidence, but really have to do with how individuals in the courtroom feel during the course of a trial. I mean, trials are difficult for everyone involved, for the defendants, for the witnesses, for the jurors. There's a whole psychological game that goes on that has nothing to do with what's happening on the witness stand.
Got a question from Chris Bono. I'll go to you, Will. Could too many expert witnesses be called that will backfire for the prosecution? That is too much for the jury to want to follow. Interesting question.
I think the answer is yes. I think, as Serena said before, the prosecution really needs to streamline their case. And you can have expert witnesses testify about just about anything and just about everything. And at the end of the day, at some point, a jury tunes that out. So to hit the high points with the expert witnesses, I agree. They're going to need to bring in somebody to testify as to the delayed disclosure. They may bring in someone to testify as to, what used to be called battered women syndrome, to talk about why Cassie stayed in this very abusive relationship. But other than that, I think that they need to move on. I think it'd be a mistake to call too many expert witnesses. It always is.
I got one more question for you, Serena. It's about an update from court. So the prosecutor asks Mr. Hayes, what did you think would happen next? Hayes responds, I was worried I would not be used again. I hadn't done my job. He has said, I want to see you basically having sex with Cassie, and I couldn't. He was asked, are you writing a book? Hayes responds, yes, a self-help book about my ED. It's advice. In your book, do you write about your time with Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura? Yes, I call them a married, wealthy couple. How long is it? 6 pages out of 186. I sensationalize it. I wanted it to be enjoyable, highs and lows. What's that about, Serena?
Prior inconsistent statements. There's always a risk if you say anything about a case that you will eventually be testifying in, and that's somehow documented, whether it's in a deposition, in a book, online. It will be saved and it will be used against you during your testimony at trial if it cuts against what your testimony is all about. And so I think, possibly the questioning has to be about, well, you didn't say this or you did say that, and today you're saying it this way, but in your book you said it that way. And now he's left trying to defend his words in his book, either to say, look, they were true, but this is also true, or, as you mentioned, Jesse, that he kind of exaggerated certain things in order to make it an enjoyable book, and it's a work of fiction.
Serena Townsend, William Corman, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on here, breaking down the real updates, breaking down the questions from our viewers. Always appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
Now, we plan to do these lunchtime shows every day of this trial, taking your questions as they come in. And by the way, one of the reasons we can keep on doing this is because we get incredible support from our partner and our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. I just want to take a minute to talk about them for a second in case you don't know who they are. Incredible track record. So they secured, get this, a $6 million verdict.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.